My dad, Larry Linton, the only true servant leader willing to stand in the arena and fight for your freedoms.
Larry is a man of God, and he will move heaven and earth to protect the people in district.
Too many elected politicians act like chameleons.
My name is Mike. I'm Larry's neighbor. I bought the house behind him. I trust Larry to give me an honest answer.
And what's important to me is faith, family, and my freedom. And I believe these values are also held by Larry Linton.
More important than ever, I believe, in our lifetime to really stand up and fight for what's right. And Larry's doing that, and I'm supportive of it.
We need to replace career politicians in Nashville with leaders willing to stand for what is right, even if it's not popular. People who feel a calling and are not looking to make a profession out of it.
You're not going to find a more honest, straightforward, and passionate individual, I don't believe. Larry is what you see is what you get. He's honest.
Listen, if you are looking for a true conservative who's passionate about the state of Tennessee, the people that live in it, and wanting to make a difference in a meaningful way, Larry's your guy.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have a special treat for you all this week, and it'll continue into next week's episode. I will be sharing with the audience a conversation that I had with an elected official who embodies true servant leadership in his position in the Tennessee General Assembly. Before I give you all a brief introduction to this gentleman, let me update you all on what has been happening since the last episode was released on the 18th of November. I wrapped up my 4-week engagement in Wyoming before theirs and my Thanksgiving break. I made it home in time to hang the Christmas lights on the house, as well as laid out the power cords to light up the yard ornaments that my bride placed in the front of the house. If you remember, I had to get that completed quickly because I was scheduled for knee surgery soon after my return home. Boy, let me tell you, that was a complete fiasco. Long story short on that was that the knee surgery didn't happen. After being at the hospital for nearly 5 hours, 2 hours waiting in registration, and almost 3 hours waiting in pre-op, I felt that I had had enough waiting around. So for the nearly 5 hours of waiting, I only received a shaved leg for my efforts. You know, it's quite frustrating when you arrive at the scheduled time for a medical procedure and they keep you waiting that long with zero explanation. You know why? It's because they do not value the patient's time at all. Now I have to go through the whole scheduling process once again. Well, heck, I've been dealing with this knee injury for almost a year now. What's another few months, right? So right now, though, my bride and I are visiting our old stomping grounds in Virginia Beach. The company that I'm a contract coach for, well, they're holding their annual training and Christmas party here, so we'll be here for a couple of days. We might swing by our old house and see how it's holding up and even catch up with some old friends. For now, though, I want to introduce the show's guest for the next couple of episodes. As I mentioned previously, this man embodies Christ-centered servant leadership while serving in elected office in the Tennessee General Assembly. We need 98 more just like him serving in the House of Representatives there in Nashville. He is none other than Monty Fritts, who represents Tennessee's House District 32. That district is made up of parts of Loudoun and Roane counties. Monty has run the gamut in his personal and professional life, accomplishing a lot since he began his career way back in the 80s. I had asked him if he would like to provide me with a biography or a CV that I could share with the audience, but being the humble servant leader he is, he just referred me and the rest of the audience to visit his website to find out more about him and his background. You can research him at the website of frittsfortn32.com. I'll put the web address in the description of this episode on all platforms. Again, though, that is frittsfortn32.com. That is the number 4, not the word 4. So let's kick off part 1 of my conversation with Tennessee State Representative Monty Fritts as we talk about a myriad of issues. And let's get on with this week's show and take a stand in the arena together again. Welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. On this show, we will discuss the assaults on our liberty by the very institution we the people created to secure our liberty. We will also compare and contrast the actions of people in leadership positions to the servant leadership that is needed to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Additionally, we will break down the many lies that elected and unelected officials in government and media spin every day in order to secure for themselves positions of power and influence that are antithetical to the system of government our founding fathers created and passed down to us. Good morning, Representative Fritts. How are you doing today? And thank you for joining the show.
Good morning, Larry. It's an honor to get to be with you this morning. I appreciate you asking me.
Absolutely. So I was talking to my wife about prior to recording this, and I had to remind her who you were actually, besides the proclamation that you came to, Sevier County and read. I said he was the one that called me, or we talked about an hour on the phone when I was running for office, and he actually offered to pray for me. And it was super humbling that I had your support. And I mean, it didn't work out the way I intended to. I mean, like that old joke says, if you want to hear God laugh, you tell him your plans. So that was my plan, and it didn't fall through as I intended, but I know that he has something better for me in mind.
And as I recall, we were going to try to meet at some function you had. You had sent me a note saying that, it probably was going to be a short thing and may not be worth the time. And I remember scheduled a second get together on that. Mm-hmm. I will tell you what I learned from this. I'm not one of those people that feel like God really called him to run for office. I got aggravated and ran for office. So I applaud you in your call, but I would offer this. Sometimes God doesn't call us to win. He just calls us to run. Sometimes I think there are going to be times that we face giants in life where the giant prevails, but God is yet calling us to run against the giant. We think about David oftentimes, and of course he defeated Goliath and took him down, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, even though they won that confrontation, they still got thrown in the fiery furnace.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes in life, God calls us to do that, to coin that phrase, maybe not to win, but to run.
Right. And it serves as probably an example for other people to do something similar to call them to action, pull them along the way, as because apathy has allowed our government to behave the way they do, and the citizens need to shake that apathy off. And if they see other people doing it, maybe I can encourage somebody else to step into the arena as well.
Yeah, you put your name on the line for everybody to explore it. And I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate even the folks that I disagree with. I think you and I are probably, in our conversations, we're aligned very closely on many things. But even those people that hold a counter view, maybe not unconstitutional view, but a counter view.
Right.
I just appreciate them running. It's a big thing. I tell people all the time, everybody ought to do this once.
Right.
And maybe state representative, maybe it's county commission. But I'm thankful that God allowed me in my life to run for office one time. And I learned so much. Won't talk you to death on that, but
right.
We're all really good experience.
Yeah, it was a learning experience. I did it twice, and I definitely learned from it. I learned what not to do, but I'm not running ever again, because it's time for somebody else to do that. I want to enjoy. I retired from the Navy in 2017, and I've been really working. I got my own company, and then I did this campaign twice, but I think it's just time now for me and my wife to enjoy our retired years while I do some consulting.
We know Dennis Powers, who's a state representative, and I've become friends with him in this role. He has told me the story many times. He ran 3 times before he won.
Wow.
You may have one more left on your under the Powers approach. You may have another go with this.
Well, I mean, here's a phrase your prior Army might be familiar with. Kitchen 6 said no. Household 6, she said no. And I agree with her. It's time time for somebody else to do that.
You know, I had, again, I may be taking up too much of your time with just chit chat, but my wife, Denise and I have been married for 41 years, and she's almost 41. And she's tremendous. She's the best part of me. Most of the things that are palatable and decent about me, God has used her to shape them into my life, I think. Fully supportive. When I decided to re-enlist in 2003 and go to Iraq, when we were going to send Tennesseans there, fully supportive, just praying for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I decided to go back to school as a working adult with already a pretty good job, but just because she was fully supportive. Anything like that, she's been fully supportive. When and she'll fuss at me for saying this because I'm going to extrapolate just a little. But I told her I was going to run for office, and she said it was kind of like, have you seen the hand puppet Ahmed the Dead Terrorist?
Yes.
Yeah, I kill you.
Well, I believe my Denise's threats when she says she's going to do that if I do this again.
So she'd been fully supportive in this, but it was not her preferred route, but it wasn't mine either. I ran of great reluctance. I ran with great determination, but from a point of reluctance because I never had any desire to get into politics. And for the honor to get to serve the young veteran that I just talked to an hour ago to try to help him with something, it's an honor to get to help folks. Right. And but I still don't know that I want to be in politics. I'd much rather be hunting or out trying to jog. I guess what I do now, you can't call running. I tell people I go and do sprints. I'll be 61 this week. And I want to be able to run 100-yard sprint, at age 61 and 62, as long as the Lord gives me on this earth, and throw my leg across a motorcycle or a horse. And, until he calls me home. But what I do today looks much less like running than what it did 20 years ago. Oh,
absolutely. I joke with the guys I coach all the time out in the field, and I show them a picture of what I look like before I retire. And I said, this is because for 30 years, I ran 5 miles a day. When I retired, I stopped running 5 miles a day, but I didn't stop eating like I ran 5 miles a day. And right now I'm battling a torn meniscus in my knee. Happened last January. The VA finally got an MRI done in August, and I was supposed to have surgery last week. I came back from working in Wyoming, and I show up at the surgical center at the UT. It's a different, not UT doctors, but they put me in registration for 2 hours and then brought me back to pre-op. And at the third hour in pre-op, I said, this is enough. They hadn't done anything for me. So I just walked out. So the only thing I got out of that surgical procedure was a shaved knee. So I got a half shaved leg, but I'm still walking around on a torn meniscus that happened in January of last year. So we'll see how the VA handles getting me fixed going forward. The community care doctors that they put me with this time, I don't think we're up to the task, I believe. So
yeah, I've had a couple knee surgeries. I had some cartilage repaired later. I had an ACL I blew up playing softball 40 years ago or 35 years ago or something. And that has not aged well, but I'm thankful to be able to get out and run. I got hit pretty hard with an IED in August of 2005, and I don't think that helped my gait either.
Sure.
But, I walked away from that. I knew my dad, my mom, and definitely my wife were praying for me because I should absolutely be dead from that blast, and I didn't bleed a drop.
Wow.
It was, I felt like my ears touched, and I went unconscious, I'm sure, for a second. Because I remember we were in an 1114 Humvee, if you're familiar with those, and we were patrolling from Balad area. We just come across the float bridge and I guess the Yala River, and we're headed back to our home base. And I saw that I was the NCOIC for this convoy security and PSD team. And I could see the mound of dirt. I typically ran lead scout truck, and I'd be a mile or half mile or something out in front of the rest of whatever we were moving. And this day I'm running rear gun for some reason. And I'm just about to key my mic. in my Humvee because I'm sitting in the TCC.
Mm.
And out whoever my scout truck was because it missed this mound of dirt and called it out. We'd call out where we thought there was an IED. And as soon as I reach for it and I'm looking directly at it, oh, it went off. So everything went quiet in my world. And my first thought was, well, dang, they've killed me. It had probably had a vulgar word in there, not vulgar, inappropriate word. They've killed me. At least I'm in heaven. Everything's quiet.
Right.
And so, and I'm sure I'm unconscious at that. As my consciousness started to come back in for whatever brief moment it was, because it hit the Humvee hard. And the good crew, I had 2 medics behind me in that truck that day. Of course, my gunner knocked him silly. He fortunately is fine. I had to knock the driver unconscious, but nobody was bleeding. Beat up from the shake inside the Humvee, but nobody was bleeding. And I started to come to because I started saying, I'm in heaven. That was my thought, right? I'm prepared to go because of Christ's blood. Mm-hmm. He shed for me. But I start to sniff, and I'm like, I'm not in heaven. I smell goat. I'm still in Iraq. And then it was like my eyes opened, and I guess I was coming out of that. And the white I was seeing was probably the residual from the blast.
Right.
And it totaled out the Humvee in an unusual way. I've got a piece of shrapnel about that big that come in where the roof of the Humvee comes down, and it went up the lining of the ceiling and fell down behind my back.
Wow.
And I mean, that's a delimber. That's, huge.
Right.
I've got it in my There I Was case at home. But I don't know that helped my gait any, because it hit pretty hard. And but I am thankful that people were praying for me, and I got to live long enough to see grandchildren.
Right.
And I tell you all that story you probably didn't want to hear. It's the first time I've ever told that in a video. But I'm speaking. I respect your service, and I'm gonna stop talking about me after this when I ask you a question. But lots of men that you and I know have confronted that same death so that me and you can live to be free men. And so that my children and my grandchildren can decide what they want to be when they grow up, and they can call freely upon the name of Jesus Christ without persecution. And we've had men that have lost limbs, legs, and arms and sight. Men and women that struggle with the PTSD of having to see things that God did not design our eyes to ever look upon. And they struggle with that on a daily basis. And so when politicians flippantly decide that they're going to violate your civil rights and remove from you or I or our children those creator endowed rights that we have been blessed with and we uphold here in America, I think of those men at Gettysburg and in the War of 1812 that were fighting off oppression and wrongs, and in Vietnam and in Korea, and D-Day, and of course, Pearl Harbor Day is coming up here. And it really offends me that we have people in high office that are okay in saying to you that your rights are not absolute.
Right.
Because I will tell you, brother, that person that tells you your rights are absolute, they don't think you have any rights other than the one they give you.
Right. They have tried so hard. It's typically one political party or one side of the spectrum, and I just refer to them all as communists. They've worked so insidiously hard for over a century now in our country to replace God with government. That way they could say your rights come from government, not God. And if they come from government, so meaning they come from man can take them away. And that's the true, that's the enemy at work. And that's how he has been so successful, is that there's been a lot of people that have bought into that. I mean, this last election proved it proved it, but it exposed that these people think that everything comes from government. Government doesn't belong in our ovaries, but it's not your ovaries that they want to get involved in. They want to protect that innocent life, that your carelessness created.
Yep. Quick question, and then we'll get to what you want to talk about. Were you a surface sailor or a submarine sailor?
Well, for the first 24 years, I was in the submarine force. So I did 6 submarines. And then my last 6 years, I was a surface Navy. My last ship was a guided missile cruiser. So your method in the Army of, kicking indoors and all that, exposing yourself to hand-to-hand or close quarters combat, I fully enjoyed getting a hot cup of coffee, sitting in a combat information center and launching tomahawks to kill the bad guys.
Yeah. Well, we're thankful for that ability, because that saves lots of American bloodshed.
It does. So yeah, it was fun. I got medically disqualified submarines. It turns out that my skin just hates me, and they diagnosed me with eczema exacerbated by the submarine environment, because the atmosphere in a submarine is just amine, which scrubs the carbon dioxide out, diesel fuel, and hydraulic oil. So at submarine number 6, they said you can't be on submarines anymore. It took them a while to figure it out. But you know what they call the guy that graduates last in med school, right? A lot of people say doctor. No, we call him lieutenant. But after that, I went to the surface Navy. A good friend of mine, he was the fleet command master chief, convinced me that, hey, since you can't do anything more in the submarine force, go to the surface Navy as a command master chief. Did that, did a 3-year tour on a guided missile cruiser, and then ended up running that team that did leadership training all over from the Mississippi River all the way out to Bahrain. It was more travel and away from home time on shore duty than I spent away from home on sea duty.
Yeah, I used to, I've worked with lots of submariners over the years, and what I did for a civilian career. And we had lots of chiefs, master chiefs I've gotten the pleasure to work with, and even a few of the officers have been a pleasure to work with. I've noticed I didn't say all. But anyways, every time you went to sea, especially in a submarine, you were at war. And you may not have been at war with another nation, but you were at war with the surroundings, because the technology, it amazes me to put that boat to drive holes in the ocean undetected is just an amazing thing. And God created your body to need sunlight, and you don't get a lot of that on a submarine, I don't imagine.
No, I'm on vitamin D for the rest of my life because of I got almost about 11 years total submerged time in my career. So I've got this great submarine fluorescent light bulb tan that will never go away. I turn into a screaming class alpha fire in the sun.
Yeah, they should put tanning beds somewhere on those.
Right. So you get this joke. Well, hopefully you should get this joke. So what was your MOS?
I was a 19 Delta. I was a cavalry scout.
Okay, Cav Scout. Ooh, I know a good friend of mine. He was a senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, John Troxville. I think he was Cav Scout as well. But this joke's funny. My brother's Army, he was a former 13 Fox Fister. And my nephew is right now, he's down at what they call the center of the universe, right? I think it's Fort Liberty now. He's an infantry officer. But so they told me this joke, and I actually got to go to the Army Sergeant Major Academy in El Paso for a year. It was fun times. But what do you call an 11 Bravo in their Class A's?
Don't know.
The defendant. Everybody laughs at that because they know the infantry is always getting in trouble.
Yeah, we the young man I just spoke to, I won't mention his name, don't have permission to, but was a 13 Foxtrot.
Oh yeah.
I'm with earlier today, and I'd forgotten even what that MOS was. I'm not sure that MOS was that in '83 when I first joined, because some of them have changed around some. But he talked about calling for naval gunfire and all that kind of stuff. I've never called for a naval gunfire, but I've called artillery, and
right.
It's a neat thing to get to do. Play the role of a forward observer.
Yeah. So, Monty, can you share a bit about your upbringing here in Tennessee and how it shaped your values?
So I grew up in Roane County. I was born in Rockwood Hospital, and spent most of my pre-high school days in Rockwood. Became a Christian in Rockwood at First Baptist Church in Rockwood. Was baptized there 51 maybe years ago now, and go to church there now. Another story how we got there, but Denise and I, we live in Kingston, and we drive down to Rockwood for church. Kind of cool to see those same stained glass windows that I didn't understand when I was a little boy going to church there, and I get to see them now. Graduated Roane County High School. My parents moved toward Kingston, so I graduated Roane County High School in 1982. No desire to go to college, had not prepared myself for it. I just wanted to go into the workforce. I enjoyed carpentry work and block masonry, and so had expected to do that. The economy, because of a Democrat, was really bad in 1982 because we were still suffering under the plague of Jimmy Carter, and at least our area was. And I'd grown up watching Rat Patrol, and I thought it'd be a cool thing to be in the service, so I got a chance to join. I've been in both the Tennessee and the Texas Army National Guard. My wife and I got married in just outside Houston, Texas, in Harris County at the courthouse and courthouse annex in Harris County, Texas. I was working there after active duty, and was in the Texas Guard in Bryan, Texas, up near College Station. And we moved back home. Houston was not a place even in those days to raise children. I did not think. We decided to have kids, moved home, and got back in the Tennessee Guard and stayed in until 93. Over that period of time, I did some I worked for the Department of Corrections in Tennessee. While I thought I was a pretty good carpenter, I couldn't get steady work doing that. I did that part-time and worked for the Tennessee Department of Corrections for a few years. I was fortunate to get into the Y-12 workforce as an hourly worker in '88. Ended up deciding to go to college, have more, my decision input about what I might do for a living, and so I was on what seemed like the 20-year program to get that bachelor's degree, but I finished that, and good people that I worked for that God put in my life opened doors for me that, just out of their grace and mercy. And so I spent 28 years there. I left Y-12. I didn't retire from the company I worked for, BWXT, until 15, but I left in 13. I went to headquarters, worked in DC for about 2.5 years as the liaison for weapons production. And in that period of time, I had great employers. They allowed me to go re-enlist. When we decided that we were going to send Tennesseans to Iraq, I decided not without me, and I went and got my old fat self at age 40 in better shape and re-enlisted, and got a chance to, because of something somebody put up in the mess hall or DFAC or whatever we call it at that time, to get to volunteer to be a PSD. And I couldn't spell PSD, Larry. I didn't know, right? But we ended up doing convoy security and PSD team. And at the end of things, I was the ranking NCO for my squadron. And great experience in 04 and 05. And then come back and finished up a couple master's degrees. I was teaching Sunday school, so I wanted to do a master's in theology. I got a chance to do that. I was running a $250, $300 million annual budget for the organization I had at Y-12, and I needed to sharpen my business skills, so I did an MBA with one of the executive MBA programs at UT, and got the VA to pay for both of those, and retired. Went and ran nuclear fuels up in Irwin. That's overstatement. I was the director of operations there. Great people who are hurting so bad today because of this Hurricane Helene.
Right.
That for about a year, and Trump had gotten elected, and I got an offer for an appointment, not a Senate confirmed appointment, but just a non-competitive appointment with the federal government. So I ran a federal program there and set up the Office of Strategic Stockpile Integration. In 2020, I decided I was going to retire and come home, just be full-time grandpa and ride motorcycles and hunt, and things I enjoyed doing. God had blessed us. And out of a sense of just kind of frustration with where things were going with COVID and seeing both parties sell out members, not all, members of both parties sell out Tennesseans and their rights. I decided I was going to run for office. And I did. I won. I ran. There was 5 of us ran in the primary. And to be honest with you, I'd spent all my work career for the 30 years prior to that in a place you couldn't really talk about what you did for a living. So most people didn't know who I was. We had to work really hard, but God gives us victory on it. And it's been a fun thing to do. I ran on several things. I ran on energy policy, and we've been able to accomplish some things there. We resolved my first year. We were able to get a resolution through that Tennessee was going to have its own energy policy and that we could be a net exporter of kilowatts rather than a net importer of kilowatts. And we restructured the Energy Policy Advisory Council. We're kind of struggling to get all the nominations on that council, but I tried to move it from political appointees to subject matter expert appointees, so that you have nuclear criticality safety and waste management and gas and oil pipeline and power distribution expertise on the Energy Policy Advisory Council, so that the political office holders, future governors, and one of the, which I'll caveat there, one of the things I think Bill Lee has done well with is pushing for the nuclear renaissance in the state. There's many things I don't agree with our governor on, but he's done, you got to give credit where credit's due.
Right.
And so we're trying to perpetuate that. We've got some more work to do on that this year, next year, to get that code where I want it, so that we can perpetuate a good subject matter expertise base, so that the politicians who can't be subject matter experts on all things will have a good base of policy input to make good energy policy decisions for the state of Tennessee. We even brought in, Memphis has 1% of the sweet crude refining capacity for the United States. And I'd like to see that to become 2 or 3%. It's good for the Memphians and good for the state for revenue. It's good for the cost perturbation. But those kinds of things we included in that. And so that was one of the things I ran on. Certainly gun rights is something I ran on. We don't have constitutional carry in the state of Tennessee. Those feeble-minded politicians of whatever party that tell you that we have constitutional carry are ignorant to the Constitution, or they're trying to deceive the people that are telling that. And we need to get back to that.
Right. We have permitless carry. We don't have
that's right.
Carry.
That's right. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that many of the Nashville crowd, the bubble in Nashville, they will attack your creator endowed right to not only defend yourself against the tyrannical government, the Second Amendment, they want to deny your right as a human being to the first law of nature and self-preservation.
Absolutely.
And, we're going to take that up again this year. I took up some of that legislation last year, and we're fortunate to have some really good people in the Senate. Joey Hensley is a senator, I think. Janice Boland's the state treasurer. Several of us, Mark Pody, and several people I work with in the House that I would just offer you are good for Tennessee, and I'm honored to get to work along beside them. The Deborah Moody's and the Chris Todds and Rusty Grills, good people. And
well, folks, that wraps up the first half of the conversation with Representative Monty Fritts. Be sure to tune in again next week for the conclusion. As always, please like, follow, or subscribe to my social media accounts, which can be found in the description of this video or audio podcast. Also, Don't forget to leave a review or a thumbs up on this and every episode you listen to. This week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from the book of Romans, chapter 1, verses 21 through 25. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they become fools and exchange the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. You know, it sure is good to know that we have people like Monty Fritts, who decided to take a stand in the arena to represent the people of his district. He chose to take a stand in the gap between the citizens of Tennessee and the people that are described in this week's Wisdom from God's Word. We need many, many more like him. We need to encourage them to take up these servant leadership positions. So until next week, stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.